April 21st today. Where is the time going? It's Mike here, back to tell you another story, and I hope you're enjoying them based on some of the comments I'm getting. You seem to be, so I'm glad. I'm glad if it helps you get by the time that we're going through in this world we're in right now. As you can see beside me, there you go, I have the Shamrock. And it's a key part of this story, so I'm not going to say any more about it until we get there and at the end of the story and see what you think. And it has to do with how we identify as people in different countries around the world. In England, they have the British monarch and the, Tower of London. France has the Eiffel Tower, the stories of French equality and liberty, etc. And, Scotland, the thistle, the rose, Australia, the proud Australians, what they had to overcome to become the nation they are, and justifiably so, they are proud of what they have done. In Canada, we had the maple leaf, and the maple leaf was always a symbol of Canadian unity. When Lester Pearson, our Prime Minister, decided it was time for Canada to get its own flag, we debated whether the flag would be red, white, and blue or red and white. We debated whether it would be, bars on each end, blue bars to represent the three oceans that surround our great country. Or so there was lots of debates about what the flag would look like, but there was never a debate about the maple leaf. The maple leaf was our strong symbol from day one, and it became part of our flag and is still a proud emblem of our country and our flag. So different countries have different things. So I'm going to tell you a story about a similar situation related to, if I can get the right hand up here, I can't, so I'm not even going to try anymore, Ireland. And in the days gone by in the western part of Ireland, there were many primitive superstitions, and the banshee and the wee people, and there was lots of them. Well, on this particular evening, this was more than a few years ago, the Siobhan, who was the little girl of the house, she was about 13, 14 years of age. They had had their evening tea and they were sitting around in front of the fire. And Ma said to Siobhan, would you please go out and get us some water for the morning breakfast so we can have some hot water then to make tea to share with each other. And so she picked up the pail and she headed off to the well to get the water. And lo and behold, when she got to the well, she slipped on a wet pavement, wet stone at the base of the well, and she fell and hit her head. And when she woke up a wee bit later, um, she was in a different world, a land of enchantment. She looked around and she didn't recognize the landmark. She didn't recognize the sky. Everything was new and different to her. And she was a bit scared, but she looked off into the distance, and in the distance she could see a great fire, a great bonfire, and it drew her to it. So she walked over to the fire very carefully, and as she approached, she noticed all these small wee people dancing and singing around the fire. But as she approached the fire, and she was looking forward to being by the fire for the warmth and the comfort it would give to her, the people stopped singing, and all the music stopped, and they separated and allowed Shaban to walk and approach the fire. And she stood there and warmed herself by the fire and was really grateful for the heat and the comfort of the fire. But then she began to look around and all these strange people, and she didn't know who they were. And she began to get nervous, as any of us would. So she turned to leave. And as she turned to leave to walk away, the people, the wee people, all closed in together. She couldn't get away. And she became very fearful. And she didn't know what to do. And the more that they crushed together, the less ability she had to leave. And she became really, really, really nervous about this. And she was on the verge of tears when in front of her approached a young man dressed in a beautiful, beautiful robes and suit. And across his shoulder and down his abdomen, down his chest, was a green sash. And in his hair, he had ties made of gold holding his hair up. And she looked at him and thought, this is a pretty nice looking man. And he took her hand and said, fear not, for my people will not harm you. Join us in the music and the dance, and we will dance the night away. And Siobhan looked at him and said, sir, you must be the foolish one in the group, for there's no music. How can we dance if there's no music? And with that, he lifted up his arm and he snapped his fingers, and the most beautiful music she had ever heard filled the air. And they entered into her ears, and they just soothed her so much. To her, the music was just something beyond this world. And he took her hand, and they curtsied to each other. And so they began to dance. And they danced away the night under the bright, bright, bright full moon, the brightest star she could ever remember. And they danced, and she loved the dancing. And the people around her danced and sang, and the music continued. Well, eventually the morning came. And with the morning came the bright sunshine. And the moon began to fade away, and the stars faded away. And the young prince took her hand and said, "You danced with us all night. Would you please join us now for some fine wines and some fresh venison, and join us in a meal to celebrate the opening of this new day?" And so she took his hand and walked with him. And by they came to a large opening in the earth. And she looked down, and the stairwell, wide stairwell, led down to a huge cavern below the surface of the ground. And she walked down with the prince to the ground, into the ground. And as they walked down, she looked up and saw the rows and rows of tables. And on the tables were the finest utensils you could imagine. Green tablecloths, and goblets of silver and bronze and gold. And on the plates, the platters, the freshest venison she had ever seen. And it smelled so good. And the goblets in front of her were filled with the purest of wine. So she sat down next to her prince and watched the people around her sit down, and the clatter and the singing. And she began to, this is really nice. And so she went to pick up the goblet of wine to drink, as she'd been dancing all night, and she was quite thirsty. And she felt that the cool, refreshing wine would help lift her spirits and get her strength up and her character going. And so she took the goblet to her lips and was about to drink when a man walked by her and said, "No, my mistress, do not drink the wine. Do not eat the food, for if you do, you will never see your homeland again. You'll be forever bound to this." And so she put the wine goblet down, and all the people looked at her and said, "What is this? You come with us, you dance with us, you sing with us, you come down into our home, and you refuse to drink the wine, and you refuse to eat the fine food we have presented in front of you for your gratification. What is this?" And with that, a large black-haired man got up and grabbed her wrist and wrapped her fist around the goblet and was forcing it up to her lips to make her drink the wine, when a fine red-headed guy, it's always a red-headed man who comes to the rescue, the fine red-headed man took her by the wrist and said, "Come with me, come with me." And as they ran up, didn't walk up, they ran up the stairs to get to the surface, he said to her, "Here, take this, keep it in your pocket, always keep it with you. For as long as you have this with you, you shall never have any harm come to you. But go home now, as fast as you can, never look back, hold this close to you. Run home as fast as you can." And so she ran and ran and ran, really not knowing where she was going, because remember, she had slipped and hit her head, and she wasn't really sure of where she was. But she kept running because she knew she had to find her home. And eventually she came out of the thick woods, and there she could see her home. But behind her, she could hear these voices and the chants and the people yelling and screaming and pounding on the ground and running after her. The wee people wanted her back. And so she ran to her home. And they were getting closer and closer and louder. And they were screaming and yelling, "You shall come back to us." And she entered her home, slammed the door shut, barred the door with the 2 bars, and went to the back room and huddled there in the corner, clutching on to her famous 3-leaf clover. And here we go. This is what she clutched onto. And she kept that with her and held it tight. And eventually, over the hours of the night, the noise outside the door calmed down. Pounding on the door stopped. She began to feel more comfortable now. But then she heard, "You have escaped us now through the power of that clover, but we will be back, and you will not have your clover with you. And we will be back, and we will take you back to our home, and you shall forevermore be ours." Well, Siobhan wasn't going to be having anything to do with that. Much as she loved the music and the singing and the wine that looked so great and the venison that looked so fresh, she kept the clover with her. and with her the best of her days. And to this day, the three clover, the shamrock, is a part of Irish heritage and tradition. And every Irishman knows the power and the strength of the shamrock. So, as we have our maple leaf here in Canada, the Irish have their three-leaf clover, the shamrock, the symbol of strength and unity. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this story.